6 stops of the Elite Series in the books. The 5th stop of the Opens coming up next. That and more on episode 180 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, like always, Kyle Jessie. And Kyle, man, for the lead up and the lack of excitement, Wheeler Lake, by far, one of the most exciting events that we could have had for the 2024 season. I'd have to rank it up there. We'll get into the rankings in just a little bit, but man, I know it was a hot one, but it was a real fun one.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I wrote about it in my fantasy column without actually knowing if it would come true or not. The title of my fantasy column was Wheeler Will Surprise Us. I just had like a feeling that it was going to be better than everybody expected. And I think when you talk about coming from Lake Murray, where guys were catching them super exciting ways, top water, schooling fish, big bags, obviously Patrick Walters putting on a show on the final day. And then you have the northern swing to look forward to here in, a couple months. It's easy to let these tournaments kind of like fall in that weird area where it's like they don't get as much hype. But man, you're not lying. I mean, despite the warm temperatures, I mean, guys caught them. I mean, it was better than I expected weight wise. I know we talked about that on the preview tournament or preview for the event, and I think you were closer winning weight wise by far than I was. But yeah, I mean, man, alive, talk about a cool tournament. Obviously, guys getting to do a little bit of everything. I have guys fishing offshore, traditional TVA stuff for summertime. You've got John Cox throwing a frog in the backest of backwaters. I mean, I don't even know how you describe that area, but really was a fascinating tournament, and I think a really good one for the year in total. When you look back at the end of the year, you'll look back at that one and be like, man, that was a really, really cool tournament.
I was telling Tommy and Dell and Davey that in studio. I said, interesting tournaments always start with 3 days of complaining leading up to them, because that's the thing of like the mystery. If everyone, I hate that we're like a minute into the episode, I'm going to say this word, but if we're talking about forward facing sonar, eliminating the mystery, and you don't like it for that reason, well, then you would have loved Wheeler, not because it didn't factor that much, but because of how much mystery there was out there. We didn't know if John Cox's spot was going to hold up more than just one day. We didn't know when they showed up to the flats who was going to be there, who found your stuff, would the fish bite? Like every day, would they move current? That was kind of the biggest expectant. Like, hey, they're going to finally start moving current. And then like we had correspondence on live based on our Elite Series pros and how they mapped out. We had guys from dam to dam. So if they moved water, we knew. And it wasn't ever significant enough to make a difference. So I always say that 3 days of complaining leading up to an event means it's going to be one interesting tournament for sure. And I would honestly, if we had to rank them, this isn't a slight to any of the other tournaments, just how they played out, I'd have to go Fork, Murray, and Wheeler. Like Wheeler's the third most compelling, fun tournament for me this year. I think almost followed by Harris Chain, Toledo, and St. John's or something like that. Those are the 6 right now because, like you said, you had the frog stuff. You had the deep ledge bite, like some of those guys, Logan and John Garrett, and maybe even a little Alex Wetherell, Jay Shakurit, stuff like that. And then as you got farther east towards takeoff from some of those anglers, you get to the Hanselmans and the Princes and the Hackneys and the guys up on the flat, some of them flipping, some of them looking for a hard spot where there's no grass, some of them trying to stay where there is grass. There was so many awesome aspects to this tournament. And then congratulations, Cliff Prince getting a victory in his 145th event. I was saying, hey, that's a lot of events without a title. There have been guys who have had more, but combined, him and his roommate, Bernie Schultz. Bernie's at 370 events or something, and Cliff's there. So over 500 events that the duo have been waiting for one of them to break through, and Cliff breaks through, has a huge lead, and then does us a favor and catches them, but doesn't catch them too big, gets real tight within 2.5, 3 pounds. And then he's the last one with the say-so and makes a pound upgrade at the end of the day, the last 30 minutes before coming in. And so he had already won it, but it was good to see him catch one, make a call, and end it on a high note.
Yeah, I mean, that last day really was electric because then it like, previously on day 3, like I was checking Bass Track, and before I could even like really get a sense for what was going on, I'm like, my goodness, like Cliff Prince might run away with this thing. And then you kind of start seeing that even on day 2 before that. And then, championship Sunday started and he catches four. I think he had 4 for 10-ish on Bass Track. And you're like, well, it's happening. And then it just for the longest time after he filled his limit, it was like I was kept updating Bass Track. And I told him this when we were shooting the tackle tip with him after the tournament. I was like, I just kept checking it, thinking for my sanity, I wish he would just catch a big one just so we would have an idea. Now it's like the stress of like, and I would have been just as fine with Ray Hanselman winning as well. But you just know, like, I don't know. It's just the not knowing factor, of our jobs, like,
And you
as
don't
to
want
who's going to
anybody,
win.
you don't ever want anybody to try to think that they're leaving the dock in a triumphant day and give up a 12-pound
Yes,
lead. Like,
yes,
and
yes.
so the wrong person was challenging Cliff Prince that day. Cliff needed anybody else to catch him. And then you look, and if Cliff's got 4 for 10, I'm pretty sure Ray had 4 for 17. Like he had 2 5s and 2 3.5s, and then he catches another 5, and you're like, how big is this bag? And I want to say this because I knew Cliff had the biggest bag of the tournament on day 3 before his 7-pounder. Like he had 22 pounds for sure before his 7-pounder. And then he catches that, and I'm like, I can't stop gawking at how big that fish is. That looks like the prettiest fish that you could ever have in the summertime of a bass tournament. Like that's not pre-spawn. That's not off a bed. Like that is a post-spawn time of year, beautiful 7.5-pounder. And we knew his weight was going to jump up big time from that. I thought maybe 25, 26, or 20. I thought 25 most, and then it was 26, and you're like, holy cow. And so on that final day, though, I was supremely confident in Bass Track being very accurate. I texted the cameraman late in the day just to check, and he said we probably have a pound more than it says on Bass Track, and he had 22.11. Well, he didn't. He ended up having, I think he ended up having 10 more ounces than Bass Track said. But I say all that to say none of Hanselman's 5-pounders looked anything more. Like, when they catch a 5,
Sure.
you're like, that's a 5-pounder. I just didn't feel like, is that a 6? Is that a 6.5? Like, I thought it was a 5-pounder. And so, really, really great fish, but nothing that was going to be like, oh, that's completely inaccurate and it's going to make Bass Track way off. Like, I thought they were pretty close. And it ended up being that. I think Cliff was just a little light, and then he comes in with 15 pounds after culling up to about, I think he had 12.15 or 13.3 or something like that. And then he goes up to 14 pounds. So he was only a pound off. So Bass Track, for as much crap as we give it, it's pretty spot on this week. It was pretty standard. I always like to try to screenshot the Bass Track top 10 and then see how the final weigh-in goes. I mean, pretty dang close.
Yeah, and that last day, I mean, that was the next thing I was going to get to is you mentioned Cliff kind of sealing the deal. At least he felt like he sealed the deal when he caught that last 3 4 pounder there at the end of the day. I mean, what an electric fish catch! Because like I said, everything that led up to that point, and obviously being on Big Fox, you're just like, man, I hope it's at least a compelling tournament by the time we make it to that point. Because otherwise, like it's probably one of the hardest things about y'all's job there in studio is making a tournament interesting when like the leader or the winner's already been decided. It's not to say that you can't, still have a great show when that's the case, but it just makes it more difficult because the story has kind of already told itself in a way. But when he caught that big one there at the end of the day and his family and all of his friends are watching like in the boats next to him, dude, I watched that and I had like chills. Like I had legitimate chills because you could tell at that point he knew like somebody would have to catch the biggest bag of the tournament and some, like by a pretty significant margin to catch him. So I mean, it was just such an awesome catch. Like I wasn't, we were off the water by that time, but by the time that happened, like we were all huddled around watching it in the media trailer, and it was like, holy cow! Like it was a really really awesome moment, and I'm sure that's something Cliff will cherish for the rest of his life is that one fish catch.
We always talk about fishing to the buzzer. Fishing, the last 45 minutes he catches one and it calls for him. And I mean, we've had that same reaction without $100,000 on the line, Kyle. I mean, when we've been fun fishing and we've gone 6 hours without a bite, I mean, we're like, we're doing that, we're cheering each other because we're like, we just want a bite. And at that point in the day, Cliff just wanted a bite. He had gotten a bite about 10 minutes prior, didn't call. And to do that, I did text his wife Kelly because they were cheering in the boat, and I said, "You guys got out there after his initial limit, so you've had nothing to cheer for all day long. So I'm
No
glad
kidding.
I'm glad he gave you one catch to cheer for." And I said that to Cliff when I called him that night and congratulated him. I said, "Man, you left your fan base hanging there. You finally gave them something to cheer about, but they were willing to hang around." And he said, "Man, they're the best." So it was what a tournament. Yeah, either guy. I mean, Cliff's been in it twice as long as Ray. Ray's had a couple seconds though, like at the Harris chain to Buddy Gross just 2 years ago. And honestly, both we talked about this on live as well that Cliff probably had Harris chain and St. John circled. These are my chances. And then probably Ray had Toledo and Fork circled as like, it's not my home. You could fit 10 states probably in between his home and those lakes, but it's his type of fishing or style of lakes. And then it ends up, those are his two worst finishes of the year. Those are two of Cliff's worst finishes of the year. And then they both come to a head where it's going to be, I'm dreading this week. It's hot halfway through the season. And what are we going to do? And then boom, they both pop up with their best finishes of the year. And Ray's kind of on a hot streak now. He got a top 10 at the St. John's. He was on camera at Murray. He fell down. He still made the cut, but he was in the 40s. So it was another solid finish and then a second place. So Ray is now turning his season around to maybe make the classic. And Cliff is trying to turn his season around to stay requalified for the elites, to just build on the momentum of a win. And we're going to three places that I wouldn't say are in his wheelhouse, but I would not be shocked if he pulls out a cut at Smith and carries that to the Northern Swing, because the amount of relief and smiles that the Prince family's probably had the last 4 or 5 days compared to the first 4 months of the season, probably more laughs and smiles this week just because it's finally happened for him.
Yeah, no question. And two things. One, he's not had the worst history of smallmouth fishing either. I mean, it's
No,
it's
yeah,
he's pretty consistent, especially at the St. Lawrence River. But to your credit, I mean, what's so funny about it is I was doing the fantasy recap this morning up on the Bassmaster Fantasy website, and when I was doing it, I looked at I go through all the numbers as far as the ownership percentages or playership percentages, their point totals, this, that, and the other. And Cliff Prince was by far the lowest selected angler in bucket E at 0.1%. So when you factor that in, that's probably like not even 100 people, definitely not even 100 people that have selected him in bucket E. And it just kind of made me smile because I thought to myself, like,
it's just his
it's
people. It's just his family. It's his Palatka people.
that, but like what's crazy, it's this sport is so unpredictable. Like if that's not the living proof of it, then I don't know what is. Because I mean, I know for sure when we did our preview show of the event, I'm certain we didn't say the name Cliff Prince one time, as far as an angler to watch or anything like that. You look at his history, I'm sure that's something you guys talked about on Bassmaster Live. Has not done well at Wheeler. Like there's no reason to think, like, not that he couldn't, make a cut there or something, but there was really no reason to think prior to the tournament that this is Cliff Prince's tournament to win. And then he just finds the magical spot and, is able to make it work for 4 days and have such an impressive victory. It's like that's what's so awesome about tournament fishing. And when you get the Elite Series with 100 guys, 100 of the best anglers in the world together, like it could happen for any single one of them, like when you least expect it. And to me, like, to the point of fantasy fishing, that's what makes it so fun. Is like you could make a pick in fantasy fishing and have no reason to back it other than you just have a good feeling. And that could be all that it takes. And like that's it, it's crazy. Like when you look back on it and think, like, prior to that tournament, like nobody was thinking Cliff Prince would be the guy to do it. And even in Bucket E, where there's a lot of guys that have had
Yeah.
difficult seasons and have struggled, and a lot of times when you get to the middle part or the end of the season, it's harder to even pick a guy in Bucket E because you're really thinking like, man, these guys have struggled this season. It's hard to think which one's going to bust out of it. Like you just don't know. Um, and for Cliff Prince to do what he did and catch the weight that he did, in my mind, I can tell you just from being out there it didn't feel like you were going to win with 20 pounds a day. Like it felt like you'd be lucky to catch a limit and not dehydrate yourself throughout the course of the day. And watching him do what he did, and then with the vibrating jig, like I mean, it was just really cool, like really an awesome event, and so happy for Cliff to get it done. And I know that 99% of the fan base also feels the same way to see him finally get his first Elite Series win.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, it just made me think like finding a magic spot and you're doing that, anybody can do it. But think about the technique. When is the last time on the Elite Series that we can say a chatterbait took a victory for a bait that catches so many fish that people use religiously? It is by far, like, crankbaits have gone to the wayside, spinnerbaits went to the wayside. The chatterbait is only going to the wayside not because of another power lure that came up, but because of the techniques of forward-facing sonar at times. So, I mean, can you help me out and tell me when that you remember? I mean, if Brandon Cobb won the St. John's because he got like third or something or fourth, he would have thrown a chatterbait in 2022. I mean, in 2023. 2022, I don't see anything. I mean, Christie threw a spinnerbait at Chickamauga. Um,
Mosley almost won at the St. John or St. Lawrence River a few years ago, obviously throwing a
yeah,
chatterbait. Just when
with
you said
largemouth.
chatterbait, that was
Yeah,
like the one thing that came to my mind,
yeah.
like the most like unforeseen thing to possibly happen.
I think, I
That's
mean,
a good point. I mean, it's
like Hackney at the Tennessee River when Gussie won, he was throwing a thunder cricket, like I
it
mean,
factors into almost every single tournament, but like you said, yeah, when you look at it, I mean, it's hard to pick a
to
tournament
win
like,
it, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So very, and June, I mean, like to me, that's like the thing.
I
Let's
got fired up just seeing like just I can just feel his rod just like not like I just
slap
literally
line in it. Yeah.
and to see
Isn't that
him
the
bite
best?
it the way they were. He talked about, like how, some of them were hooked weird, how they were biting it. That 7-9, I played it over and over and over and over again in my mind, and I watched it. We showed replays on the show. I put it as the main video, highlight before the Tackle Tip Tuesday started. If you're watching it, he goes, oh, 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 I got him. And it's like that fish, or there were multiple fish, but that fish easily could have just swatted twice at it. And it's a 7-9. And so, yeah, who knows when the last time a chatterbait, um, I mean, I wish we had all day to be able to do that and figure that out. But even into the fall events, I wouldn't say that we saw it. The St. John's River that Mueller won in 2020. He was swim
Swim
jigging
jig.
and
Yeah.
flipping at times. Eufaula was offshore. The fall. Oh, I guess the last chatterbait win was, or the last bladed jig win would have been Frank Talley probably at Gunnersville
Yeah.
up the river
Yeah.
in 2020.
And
So,
that's what's funny is
and
you
that's at
factor
Tennessee.
in,
That's one more lake over.
yeah, and you factor in that too. Like it's hard to, granted, like guys rarely win tournaments only throwing one bait, but like even that, like threw a frog as well. I mean,
Yeah.
it was so dominated. At least like the majority of the catches I saw on live, which I don't get to watch obviously nearly as much as you get to see, but seemed like they were all on a chatterbait. Like I don't remember seeing him,
I think
even
he caught like on day two, he caught his last 5+ pounder on his shaky head, uh, you know, 7-inch worm. And that was when he scooped the fish and there's grass hanging off his spinning rod. And he's like, we're done. I'm not fishing. And he got and that got him over 20 for that day. And then, yeah, he did catch some others that like, placeholders, twos, but he would end up calling them out
sure,
each
sure.
day, it seemed. And, but then, yeah, big worms, man. You saw Weatherell throwing like a 16-inch worm, 14-inch worm, trying to like figure. I think he had 4 of those worms and he was doing it. He gets fifth, his best elite finish. Ray Hanselman throwing a big worm. Really couldn't keep him hooked up on a treble hook bait. So we got to see him. I mean, if you saw Ray, he would be like, oh, I'm on point, and he would go. And then he said, like, he was feeding it to him, letting him eat it. And so I was like, that is some old school style fishing. And so I did laugh at how many comments were still like, yeah, I could do it if I was spotlight. I was like, Cliff Prince hadn't looked down in 4 hours, and Ray Hanselman's back is to his electronics. I don't, like, this is the most anti, it was an offshore bite, but anti. And it is weird for fans at home who, some fans know, a lot of fans have no idea what's going on. And it's not because we don't explain it. It's just they can't visualize it. They've never been there. They don't know what the flats are like. That's why we try our best to teach it. But it's 4 or 5 feet. You're out in the middle of nowhere. It's 4 or 5 feet. Like you jump in, I mean, my shoulders are out of the water. We're just hanging. But it looks like you're how'd you find that magical spot? Half the time it's a shad flickering in practice, and you bomb over there and catch a 2 pounder. You're like, that might be something. And then you learn more each day about it. Cliff said in that tackle tip, he feels now after the tournament that was a shad spawn thing almost exclusively because he'd catch them throughout the day in practice or see them. He found him at 1 o'clock schooling on shad. Now, I don't know if it was like the traditional shad spawn that we know it, but it operates like that where it was early morning, catch them real quick on shad imitating baits. They may do it throughout the day as well, but it's every morning. And so he never really had to push it after 10 o'clock, honestly. I mean, he could have caught 0 fish after 10 o'clock all week and won the tournament. The one that the final day one helped, but it didn't give him 4 pounds coal, all those things. So I think that it was such a dominant thing that no one would have believed it if he's like, yeah, I think I got a shad spawn thing going on. And you're like, in middle of June, it's 900 degrees out here.
Yeah, I mean, to your credit too, I'm by no means a Wheeler expert. I've never even made a cast out there, but I've covered 2 tournaments out there. And like you said, the flats, I mean, to find something like that in practice, you could just fish the flats for like days at a time. I don't even
18
want to say an
years,
entire day.
18
Like,
years, the
I
whole,
mean,
the
you
whole,
could just
your
fish
life.
it all. Yeah, I mean, granted, like I'm sure there's a little bit of fortune involved there, like a little, I mean, luck, that's what you want to call it. But like, if you fish that in practice and you find that one spot that has them, yeah, I mean, like you said, I don't think forward-facing sonar had much of anything to do with that. I'm just guessing. I mean, I don't want to speak for Cliff, but I mean, if you're just fishing that entire area, it's a ton to break down. So I mean, if you just happen to get a bite or two in one area, and then like you said, he mentioned that throughout the week as well. Like they would school throughout the day. It's not like they would school like so often that you just sit there with your rod at your shoulder or your at your
Mm-mm.
hip and wait for them to school. But like
They
it
would
would
get, they would
happen
get
throughout the
active.
day.
There would be a
100%.
window. Yeah.
100%. So I mean, it's not like a yeah. I mean, there's a ton of those sweet spots out there. I mean, he just happened to find the sweet spot of all the sweet spots.
Thank God he didn't find it 8 a.m. on Monday morning of practice because I would have given away, it would have been my telltale sign. The whole elite field would have known that I was on the juice because they would have seen me there at 8 o'clock in the morning on day one. And I would have never let it get out of my sight. I'd have been somewhere around there just making sure nobody's on it. Oh, I found this spot. I found this spot. But I think he said he found it at 1 o'clock on the final day of practice or 1 o'clock on the second day of practice. I think he said second day of practice. And so he only had the final day of practice to wait it out. And then we can go time. 19 pounds, 20 pounds, 26, and then 15. And it's crazy that 15 is such a dramatic drop off when that's actually like a top 10 worthy bag every day of the tournament. Like, oh, Cliff has the fourth biggest bag on day one, the second biggest bag on day two, the biggest bag day three. And then he has like the fourth biggest bag of the final day top 10 or something like that. And so it's like nothing to shake a stick at, man. What a week. And to average 20 pounds a day on a Tennessee River Lake where it's so hot and they didn't move any water. That's nobody thought that was going to happen.
They weren't moving any wind either on the tournament. I can tell you that for sure. I think the last day was probably the warmest temperature wise. I think the high was like 98, and I'm not even making that up. I have a picture on my phone, but it was probably the most bearable of all four of the days because there was a little bit of a breeze. And I don't know where I'm going with this other than the fact that I remember Cliff on the last day was like he said, a few times he was surprised they weren't biting better with the wind. And I
Yeah.
started thinking
It
when I heard
almost
him say
hurt
that,
him. It almost
yeah,
hurt him.
when I heard him say that, it was just so funny because I was like, if you're fishing a chatterbait across like, a flat like that, you would think 99% of the time it would be better with the wind, but it seemed to be the exact opposite. So it's just like, it's just a crazy deal where, when I heard him say that, I was like, man, that is true. Like this is the one day that he struggled. And so one day there's been wind, but like how backwards is this? Like that they're not just like chewing today and he's not caught 28 pounds instead of 26 today rather than, the day before when there's absolutely no wind and it's just dead calm out there and hot as can be. And then that's when they're biting. It's like, what is going on out here?
I mean, it was takeoff was at 6 o'clock, and at 6:15, I tweeted out a screenshot of Cliff Prince on live mix as I'm rolling into studio, and he's holding up a fish and says 2 more bites. Like, so it happened, but yeah, they weren't big. So I have to feel that either wind, I'm not going to say Cliff was inaccurate with casts, but maybe it was a little harder to hit that small spot or get it near him. Cause it's like he said, don't cast far enough, you don't get to the fish. Cast too far, you're all tied up in grass. And so how that wind maybe made that spot a little smaller almost, maybe. Or like we've said, that's all it had. That's all that spot had left on it. Like it was just it was the perfect 4-day spot. Give it a fifth day, and boy, it's not gonna, we got nothing left for you, Cliff. That kind of thing. But um, huge week for him. Big week for our points race. A little bit of angler of the year talk. Man, Trey McKinney, day one was in the 40s. And then I believe, let me see, let me click his name. Trey McKinney was day one was in the 40s, day two was in the 30s, and day three moved up into the 20s. He ended up finishing 22nd place. So now listen to his finishes this year, Kyle. 12th, 1st, 6th, 17th, 6th, and 22nd. And this is one where he didn't start out in the top 10 and he had to get better every day. He had to figure out how to survive a little bit more every day. And so, and it wasn't like a landed on him in practice. And he looked like he figured it out throughout the week to improve. Meanwhile, guys, shockingly, that are just great anglers got thrown for a loop in this event. I'm just going to scroll all the way to the bottom. Steve Kennedy, 2 pounds, 14 ounces. Don't get me started there. I don't know how that's possible, but holy cow. We had him on live day one, and that's crazy. Iconelli, 96th. Stetson, 94th. Jordan Lee, 92nd. Mullins, Tennessee River guy, 91. Christie, Taku, 88. Or Corey, look at that. Hold on. Wow. Lester Palmer, Corey Johnston, Jason Christie, Taku Ito, 86th through 90th. I mean, that's a starting lineup in fantasy fishing. Brandon Lester, Luke Palmer, Corey Johnston, Jason Christie, Taku Ito. Normally you can't get those 5 because they're all in bucket A. Like, what in the
Right.
world?
Yeah.
And they're all there. Scott Martin, Austin Felix, down in the 80s. Joey Cifuentes, I think that's his best finish of the year, 78th. So maybe some momentum. It by far was his best finish of the year. Oh, no, sorry. He finished 65th at Toledo. So his second best finish of the year for Joey. Yeah, this one threw a lot of people for loops. Matt Airy, ever consistent Matt Airy, 77th. So our Angler of the Year race is now on its head a little bit because Trey has extended his lead to about 59, but not over Jordan Lee. It would be over Justin Hamner. Our classic champ is now second place in points. Cody Huff right behind him. Jacob Fouts right behind Cody, and Chris Johnston rounding out the top 5. Meanwhile, John Garrett has moved up to 6th place, and that's for John. John coming off of a 63rd at Louisiana to start the year. Then he had a top 30. He won. He got 60th in Palatka, and then he's got an 8th and a 4th. So he has 3 top 10s. One of those is a win, and then a 28th, and the others are in the 60s. So John Garrett's somehow pulled himself up from the Rookie of the Year ranks and is now second in Rookie of the Year. Jordan Lee, 7th. Wesley Gore, 8th. JT Tompkins and Jay Shakir at 9th and 10th. And then Patrick Walters, John Cox, Corey Johnston, the first 3 out of the top 10, 11th, 12th, and 13th. So what do you make of that?
Well, as I'm sitting here looking at it, what I make of it is the fact that Trey McKinney has a 100-point lead over sixth
Yeah.
place
And
is
over second in Rookie of the Year.
is a head scratcher. That's a massive margin there. But he talked about it on stage. A lot of times you get guys like Brandon Polnick's one of them, obviously, but a lot of guys don't want to talk about AOY like, really at all, like when they're in contention for it. But Trey was pretty outspoken on stage about how, the 2 tournaments in New York, like the Northern Swing, were really kind of a, question mark. Like he'd never been up there, like never really experienced a lot of that. So he was very honest on stage. I want to say on day two, maybe day one, that he was really looking to try to widen or at least keep whatever lead he could, in this tournament at Wheeler and then obviously at Smith, just because he knew that, you know, the two New York tournaments to finish the year would be a much bigger question mark than some of the tournaments so far this year. A lot of them that he fished on the Opens, obviously, as well. So, um, very impressive, though. I mean, you can't really say that enough. I mean, the kid is so good and has been so consistent. I mean, you haven't seen him really struggle much at all. I mean, like you said, obviously, and you said in 40th after day one.
45th or 42nd, yeah.
So I mean that's probably the most
His one slip.
adversity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the most adversity he's had to overcome and he moved in the right direction like you said rather than, feeling the pressure and moving the opposite direction. So huge for him and his AOY hopes and yeah, definitely a big shakeup in the top 10. Obviously Jordan Lee falling all the way to 7th. Nobody would have guessed that. I mean, it's a
There's
tournament
now
that really
a three-way tie now between John Garrett, Jordan Lee, and Wesley Gore. And so now you can see it start to bunch up to where I think, Cody Huff to JT Tompkins from third to ninth is 20 points. So there's going to be a whole bunch more movement. And that's
no question.
that Trey deal. He starts the week 40 spots lower than John Cruz. And this will just show you how a week can go. He starts 40 spots lower than John Cruz and ends up like 2 spots below John. And like John had fallen throughout the week to 20th and he moved up to 22nd. And that's not to hate on John or something, but that's just to show you like you want to get better every day. And if you're near the cut on day one, here's how you can salvage the tournament and not just bomb out or finish in 40th. How you can get better. And so he did that. Hamner fishing really well. I wouldn't be surprised if he could make up a few points on Trey next week at Smith. We'll ask him about that. He'll be in studio this week to do some classic TV with me and Tommy and do the co-hosting duties for the Eufaula Oklahoma Open that starts tomorrow, or when you're watching this podcast, it starts today. And so that's the next stop. But any thoughts about Wheeler before we move on? Because I saw it play out. We talked about it. You're going to see people maybe at the dam fishing for smallmouth. We saw that with Hamner and other species, but smallmouth live over there a little bit more predictably. We saw the Elk River factor. Wes Logan put on a good show day one and ended up having a great event because of that. We talked about guys who needed to catch them to improve their classic hopes. I think we both looked at Bob Downey as somebody who could make it down the list. Who else did you say? But Bob went from 76th to 63rd in points because he made the cut and had a good week. So he is much closer to classic possibilities. And then we talked about Seth Viter, 90th place, 100 points out, moves up to 71st. And he's still about 90 points out, but he's now getting more within the realm of reason. He needs to have another good one, but some of these guys that were way out have jumped up. KJ Queen jumped up. I'm pretty sure he's in 50th now. Hanselman had a great week. He moved up. Meanwhile, guys like Ben Milliken fell out of the classic cut. You had Jason Christie fall out. You had Luke Palmer, who was just on the outside, has fallen down worse. Brandon Cobb. I can't remember where Cobb was, but we had talked about him being somebody that we expect these two Alabama events to maybe be able to gain some points back. And he's in 59th.
I think I said Kenta Kamura was the one that I expected to jump up.
And I
Not
think
only,
he just missed the cut.
yeah, I think he did a little bit, but not a super significant jump. Obviously, jumped a few spots. But my last thought would be, I thought about this during the tournament. I covered um, Justin Hamner on day 3. I guess day 3 it was. Day 3 was his worst day. That was the day he caught 10,
Yeah.
10 change. I covered him and I was sitting there thinking, like, as I was watching him, like when we had him on post classic and we talked about the AOY race and like, you might as well just go win that too. Like you're in a good position there, like so early in the season that you really have no idea how that's going to play out. But I think at the time he was like, is it like 7th or something? I mean, it was really solid. And then here he is in 2nd place. I mean, you just want to talk about a guy that's set up to just, I mean, not winning the classic, you're going to take off like in a big way. But you talk about a guy that like has really taken advantage of being able to fish free and like, you know, you just see it in his demeanor. Like see him around obviously at the tournaments all the time. And it's like nothing flustered him before either. It's just kind of his personality as it is. But you want to talk about a scary dude moving forward. Like Justin Hamner is going to be as in a Zona terminology. He's going to be a killer. Like dude is going to be a problem here for a good while, with everything that, he's got going on after the classic and how much success he's had afterwards. That's something to keep an eye on. I think he's going to really, really, really become a star in the next few years, even more so than he has. Like I think that the potential for Justin is incredibly high.
People are going to be asking him to start mowing lawns again so that he can get out of their hair on the Bassmaster Elite Series. Well, I've got let's just go ahead and segue then. We'll just talk about Eufaula, Oklahoma for the next Open. It'll be the 5th stop of the season for the Opens, which means we are now going to be at the halfway point of our Open season after day 2 of competition. There's really no way to do a halfway mark when it's odd numbers of stuff, but it'll be, I guess if takeoffs are around 6 or 6:30 this week or something, it would be like 11 o'clock on day 2 on Friday is the midpoint of the season, and what you do with it matters there. So Evan Kung leading the points race, Dakota Ebear, second place there. Third place, Easton Fothergill, Cody Meyer, Brandon McMillan, Matt Adams, Paul Marks, Josh Butler, our latest champion, and Bobby Bakewell. That's your top 9 who would go on to the Bassmaster Elite Series. You got guys like Bo Browning, Kyle Austin, Ty Faber, Tucker Smith, and Cliff Pace, Andrew Loberg, Andy Newcomb. I know all these guys. I could just keep going. Trevor McKinney, Jack York, Clark Ream, and Matt Messer. They are, that's your top 20 in points. So how are we feeling going to Eufaula, a place that most of these Opens guys went last year? But boy, it is some chocolate milk out there, and we'll get to hear some more details on the water clarity conditions and things.
Yeah, at the Wheeler event, the guys that were fishing the Open, John Soka mentioned it on stage, I want to say on day 3 or day 2, but you know, the water was high, and I haven't looked at the water levels since, so don't quote me on this. The water was high, it's in the bushes. Everybody expected it to be a flipping contest, which would have been really, really cool to see in the middle of June. But those lakes like that, when the water gets high, the fish just flood to the bank and they go to the available cover. But it seems like the
Texoma a few
water,
years ago.
yeah, 100%, same general region of the country too. So, um, it looks like the water's falling out. That's making it a little tough from what I understand. But I mean, Eufaula is definitely one of those lakes that kind of gets overlooked um, in a lot of ways. But like you said, it is very dirty in certain parts of the lake. I mean, it is extremely dirty. It's a huge lake. I mean, it's just a massive body of water. So I mean, that makes it difficult. And then, obviously the wind and everything makes it hard to get around. I mean, it's a challenging lake, but I think it's going to be a really interesting playing field. And like you said, having a little bit of experience from last year's Open, hopefully will give a lot of the guys a little better idea of what to expect this time around.
Yeah, so it's been about a month and a half high. It was rising at the end of April. Big storms came through Arkansas, Oklahoma. A lot of rain funneled down through there. That lake swelled up around that last week of April, first week of May. So now if it's finally falling out and it's mid-June, you know how long it's been up in the bushes. So it's nothing new to these fish. These fish just have to, it takes probably a day to get comfortable on where this water is going to fall to. It depends on if they're falling inches a day. But we're going to have an angler hop on with us in just a minute to give us those conditions, because that's something that we don't know what it looks like. We don't know what the conditions actually are when the readouts, you could have thought, man, they pulled some water at the Tennessee River. Well, we couldn't feel it. It was minimal at Wheeler. So I don't want to assume data on charts is correct. So we're going to have last year's champion join us, Joey Nania, a 2-time Opens winner. And just to get his perspective on it, he's a guy who loves finesse fishing, a guy who doesn't mind throwing himself a bladed jig around as well. And so we'll have to get his reaction to that as well. A June elite event, getting one on a chatterbait. But Yeah, he won here last year to make it to the Classic in Tulsa, and now he's going back and kind of to get his thoughts on what's different, what he dialed in, water clarity, because Hank Weldon, tournament director, called me this morning, and boy, the description he gave it was one of disbelief from my perspective. But I think we got our guy. Joey, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. I am here.
Hey, we are welcome to the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, man. I don't know if this is going to be a good sign or not. Maybe you win the tournament again at Eufaula, Oklahoma. But tell us, we were just talking about the conditions on the lake, how the water color is, how the water level is, and if it's much different or any similarities to last year's event in June. So what's it been like now that practice is done?
Yeah, it's definitely a different ball game this time around. I just caught the last bit of what you were saying about the watercolor and what Hank said about it. And it looks like you could walk across it for real. It's kind of crazy. Like Trip Nugent got baptized in the water right there by the boat ramp today where we're launching from. And I'm pretty sure he had to break through the crust to get in there, but he sacrificed his clothing and took the dip. So it is wild though. Like it is as dirty as it gets. And at least part of the lake is. And this lake still has clear water mixed in, or clearer water, but the mud is infiltrating farther into places where it didn't infiltrate last year, like below the bridges, where the bridges kind of held it back last year. And it's changing things a little bit. The biggest difference I see is last year it felt like there was like a ton of fish in this lake. Like it just felt like it was really, really fishy. Like you just get a lot of bites. And this year it just doesn't seem like it's as fishy. So I don't like that feeling. But it is what it is.
Never a good feeling, that's for sure. And it's a
Yeah.
big body of water. That's something Ronnie and I just talked about a little bit ago. Is I have experience driving from Northwest Arkansas to like Dallas, and it seems like you drive over the lake for like 3 days long. Like it's a big body of water. You mentioned the water clarity. Do you think it's a matter of like certain areas of the lake will play greater than others, or do you think the field will be spread out a little bit?
So as far as like practice and what I'm seeing goes, everyone is trying to do what I did last year. And I mean,
You'll have that.
Why'd you tell
I
everybody what you did last year,
I don't know, man. I didn't think we were coming back this soon. Honestly, like I kind of thought about it, as like if I would have known that we were coming back the next year at the same week, I still like I don't know. It's worth burning it down on a win,
Oh,
and
man, yeah.
stuff is very important. But and I mean, obviously I posted the video and I talked like on my YouTube and I talked about where I was and what I was doing. And I was very open and transparent with that. And, I don't regret it. It was a wonderful week and it was all meant to be. But like the place where I caught some of my biggest fish last year, the key place, I literally have not got to make a cast on it yet because there's been a boat on it or right next to it the entire time, like different boats the entire practice. So I literally have not made a cast where I caught my biggest fish last year. And every brush pile that I fished last year where I could kind of run around and find new piles and I was the only one doing what I was doing. Now everyone's doing it. And so but the thing is the conditions aren't as good for it. So everyone's doing the last year's pattern, but the conditions aren't as good for it. So I think shallow is going to play way more of a factor than it did last year. I think it's supposed to on this lake with the mud and like these fish are supposed to live shallow. Last year, the water had been down for a month. And so it was clear and they hadn't had much rain. It's like it's either a desert here and there's no rain or it's a monsoon. It's like rain. No in between. So, yeah, it's kind of weird. But I think a mixed bag. Guys are going to catch them offshore. These guys are way, way, way too good at doing what they're doing, and they're going to catch them out there. But there are going to be some Oklahoma guys and some grinders that go up there and catch them shallow.
So you talked about clarity. I think Hank Weldon described it as if you were putting it on a chart, you don't even say like inches of clarity. Like as soon as the bait touches the water, like you can't see it. So that's no clarity. But tell us about the water level. Obviously, dirtier water in the summer. This place fishes well in June for the most part, and it's supposed to be these conditions. So the fish aren't, you guys might be caught off guard. They might not be, but the one thing that can make those shallow fish spookier is if that water's falling. Is it falling tremendously or just incrementally this week?
It's falling consistently 4 inches a day at least. And so I've been watching it since the last big rain a couple weeks ago. It reached its peak and it got up to like 4.5, almost 5 feet above full pool. And last year we were just a couple inches above full pool, so pretty much right at full pool. And now it's back down to, I haven't checked it this afternoon, but it was like 1.69 feet above full pool. So it's dropped 3 feet in the last week, which is or a little over a week and a half, I guess. It's dropped like 3 feet. So it's dropping 4 inches a day. Like there's, the everything, you just look at it and you can see all the bushes that are becoming more and more exposed. And that's the hard thing. And the tricky part is, there's a lot of fish shallow because the water's dirty and these fish like to be shallow, but the water is anything but stable. So, and it's just going to keep dropping throughout the tournament. So the question is, are those fish in the clear parts of the lake going to just run out, and all the piles that you marked and all the offshore stuff that you hoped was going to be good, but wasn't that good in practice as far as catching fish, or is it all of a sudden going to turn on and be lights out, and that's where it's going to be won? Or is the typical Oklahoma shallow stuff going to pan out? It's a tricky one. It's kind of weird. It gets going weird directions.
Kyle, it kind of feels like one of those tournaments where a dude's going to be catching them or blasting them shallow and have like a huge lead, and on that final day, just like 3 bass. Yeah. And I don't pray that upon anybody, but like as that pattern starts to fade shallow, you could probably catch 10 more good fish doing that. And then on that final day, you just the way there's not enough water up there, and somebody's going to try to track you down with 25 offshore.
They could leave you in a hurry right now, I feel like, as far as the shallow bite goes. But it's so weird. Like I only practiced like 3 days because we had family stuff, and then a busy Sunday at different churches here, actually getting to preach, which was cool. But in my 3 days, you try to build a game plan of, what's happening and what's happening now, but more importantly, what's going to happen, and trying to stay confident that these fish are going to move offshore was tricky. All these things combined with the extra pressure offshore. There's not that many fish offshore right now, but they should be going there. The water level's dropping. Fishing is a confusing game, as you know. It's weird. And then 3 days of the tournament, how much is it going to change from Thursday to Saturday? If you make Saturday, but even Thursday to today to Friday, it's going to change a ton. So imagine, I don't know.
Yeah. Saturday, first day of practice is conditions, Kyle, to Saturday when the tournament ends. It's going to look totally different probably.
Oh gosh, yeah, like several feet in water change. And I've heard from some buddies that said Saturday and Sunday were their best days of practice, and then it's gotten tougher. It's like, well, yeah, things are changing in a hurry. It's crazy.
What is the forecast looking like there this week? Has it been pretty consistent weather-wise? Is it looking pretty consistent? Is that going to be a factor that guys are going to have to consider, or is it going to be pretty consistent?
It's been super windy and hot, which, it's been nice because we haven't been horribly sweaty, because at least the wind's been blowing, because it would have been, it's miserable when you get out of the wind right now. But it looks like it's going to be 89 to 92 every day, and it's supposed to be less wind, and the wind's completely different direction. It's blowing out of the northeast instead of southeast. So it's swapped around quite a bit, but like it was blowing 15 the last 2 days of practice, not today, but yesterday and the day before, it was blowing really, really hard, like sustained at 15. And so that kind of made it tough and pushed the mud around and made practicing not that fun, getting hammered by the wind. But it's supposed to be lighter winds and cloudy tomorrow. So it's been also very sunny, but some clouds mixed in. And tomorrow's supposed to be a cloudier day. So 5-pounders might bite and everyone might have a big bag, but I don't really know. I'm not an expert on this lake, even though I won here.
Yeah, of course.
I know what I do, like what I did, and I like, it all worked out really good. But that was just a blessing to win and catch what I had. Like I didn't have extra fish to be losing them. Like I caught what bit, and it was just enough to somehow catch 3 really good bags and win. So I'm no expert on Eufaula, Oklahoma.
To give Trey McKinney a 2nd place finish. He's won enough and done enough in the elites that you needed that one last year.
Yeah, that's right.
So tell me, as a guy who does the Ned Meeky, and really kind of got that fired up on and fishing at home, and then you obviously are very skilled with your electronics with that, but you also love a chatterbait. You've been with Z-Man for a long time, it seems. And so me and Kyle were talking about it earlier. The Wheeler Elite gets one on a chatterbait. And I think going back to 2020 at Gunnersville, when Frank Talley up the river in the fall won on a thunder cricket, was the last time a bladed jig was the primary bait someone on the elites won with.
Yeah.
Did you see any of the Cliff Prince footage this week on a chatterbait? Does it make you jealous that he was catching 26 pounds on a chatterbait? And how awesome is it to see that in June when it's unexpected, probably?
Yeah, that is cool. And like my first open win was on Pickwick, and I caught over half my fish on a chatterbait on a 3/4 ounce jackhammer on grass and stumps and stuff like that. But I watched like most of the footage. I watched like almost all of the Bassmaster Live stuff if I can. Like I'll be out fishing and have it sitting on my graph playing, And so I love watching it. And obviously I'm good friends with a lot of those guys, with Wesley and John Garrett and all those guys. So it's fun watching them do good and watching them catch them. And it was cool to see them though, hammer them on a chatterbait. And the crazy thing is, like, you go out to Lake Wheeler, it is not that easy to go out there and figure out the little sweet spots and to catch those fish. And I do think it would have been different if it was an open, honestly, with 200 boats and with the fact that he probably would have had 4 guys that were piling in around him. Like there's really no comparison to having double the amount of boats out there. And I don't know if it's for sure, but I'm kind of starting to think like this year you have even more offshore fishermen, where the elites are like still what, if a 50-50 split or a 60-40 to the guys that are going to go shallow and the guys that are going to stay offshore. So you might only have 50 guys that are out there like really hammering the deep stuff, where in the opens there's like, it seems like there's probably like 120 of them now that are going to fish offshore no matter what. So it's like this new thing, man. It's pretty crazy. And I'm glad I was in on it early and I got a couple of really good finishes on it. But now it kind of makes me want to just go back to the bank and throw a chatterbait and a spinnerbait around and catch fish, go flip.
You could still win that way.
Yeah, look, we're okay with that. Yeah, no kidding.
Would that be great? Just slow roll a spinnerbait on something and like win a tournament. Big blade, man.
Well,
It'd be good times.
To your credit, I can back up what you said 100% because I made that exact comment, is covering the Open at Wheeler last year versus the Elite. Granted, later in the year, so I mean, it made certain things better than it would have been for the Open, of course, but so that probably played into the spreading out of boats a little bit, but it's not even a comparison when you looked at the flats and the amount of boats would be on one spot. For every spot, like sweet spot, whatever you want to call it, there would be like at the Open, I mean, you'd know better than I would, but like 5 to 15 boats. And then this year, I mean, you'd see like 5 would be like the max you'd see on like a general area. So yeah,
there's no managing fish. Like Cliff Prince stopped fishing at 10 every day. Like he would have been fearful that the 5th flight that's just taking off at 10 o'clock would have been coming in.
10 o'clock.
No, you're right. You're not wrong about that. But it was cool to see, man. I was happy for him. I didn't realize he'd been on the Elite for that long, like 14 years. That's a lot.
I think he even fished. I think he was a rodeo guy for a long time, and I think some of his finishes where he had like top 10s weren't from the front of the boat. I think he even fished as a co-angler, maybe on the Elites before he made the Elites to the Opens or something. Like he had some different resumes back in the day before he qualified. But Kyle, do you have anything for Joey? Because I got one more question and it's going to be off the topic. So if you want to talk, you follow one more question and then I'll ask him the last one.
You can ask me who my best co-angler ever was, or who's the most popular angler that was a co-angler now. That'd be a good one.
Who would that be?
You've already posed the question. Let's hear it.
Probably Takume Ito. Yeah. was my Luke Martin.
That's funny.
And you can see he's a genius because he learned English like within 2 years. He was speaking English.
That's funny.
Super, super smart. No question.
And then Wesley co-angler ones too. But all right, new question. Sorry.
That's pretty stout. I mean, that's really stout. I mean, we could start giving giving you some credit for some of these guys' success. I mean, there's got to be some of that built in.
I started ragging on Zeke and I said, good thing Zeke got a top 10 at Logan Martin, because I thought I'd have to flip the script on thinking Zeke was the good angler between him and Wesley Gore, that Wesley's actually been better, and I was underrating him the whole time.
Man, those are fighting words. Oh gosh.
The only question I had fishing related, we typically do this on almost every podcast that we preview an event, but just winning weight predictions. Obviously 52 pounds, 8 ounces, what it took last year. What's your prediction this year to win, and then obviously to make the top 10?
I want to say it's going to be less. The weights are going to be lower. I don't know for sure, but based on what I've seen, it's way harder to catch fish. So I'm going to have to say 50 pounds is going to win it. So, almost a pound less per day average. So like 16 a day, maybe 17 a day, but not quite. And then I think as far as making the cut, it was 30, little over 30 last year. So a little over 15 a day. And I think it'll probably be more like a high 14s this year, maybe a pound less a day. So we'll see if I'm right. I could be totally off and wrong, but I don't think it's going to take quite as much weight to do good. And it only took 11 and a half to get paid last year. So I could see it being 11 pounds a day, like 22 pounds. If you can get over 22 pounds total for 2 days, you'll get paid, and they pay a little deeper. So I was thinking top 40. So it might be even less than that.
Yeah. A couple more spots down there.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued, and I'm glad we're doing Bassmaster Live. Sorry we weren't doing live last year when you won. I would have loved to see that final day, big ones. But yeah, we'll have Bassmaster Live rolling. No pressure for whoever's in the top 10. We'll have classic champ and second in points right now, Justin Hamner, in studio commentating with Tommy and I and Such. So it'll be a good one. But last thing, you said it right off the rip. Tell us about Trip Nugent getting baptized this week. And is he a different shade? Like it's one of those carbon fiber dips when you dropped him in there. Now does he have like he's got a hue over him now?
Yeah, he got like a new paint job. Yeah. He looks very tan from the mud. Yeah, Trip he honestly had conviction about it at Logan Martin. At Blake said at the end of our focus group meeting, which they do at every Bassmaster Open on Wednesday, the registration day at 1:30. They have a focus group meeting right before we register at the registration site, and we get together, and somebody shares their testimony. So it's an awesome time to invite somebody or come and be a part of. But he felt conviction because at the end, Blake said that we're here as a body of believers, and that's really our church body when we're on the road. And there was probably 25 or 30 guys there today, and that's how many really all of our events have had, that or more. And it's really cool to see everyone coming together. But he felt conviction at Logan Martin when he was leaving. He's like, man, because Blake said, we'll go down to the boat ramp right now and baptize somebody in the Coosa River. And Blake wanted to do it, or Trip Nugent wanted to do it, and he didn't. And he called Blake shortly after that and said, hey, Eufaula, Oklahoma, let's get in the lake and make this thing official, and just, have his public profession of faith be with his church family on the road. So it was pretty cool, man. I got a video of it I'm going to post later. And Blake did a great job and also shared his testimony, which was great. And it's been a good week in ministry. The fishing has been subpar, but it's okay. I got to preach 3 different church services on Sunday. Wow. At Community Culture Church, 2 at one location, then another one in McAllister. So Sunday was busy. I did catch some fish in the afternoon, but it was an awesome day.
That is awesome. That is so awesome. Thank you for what you do on the road, you and Blake and the whole gang. I'm glad I got to go to the focus meeting last year for the Opens. This year I had to flee to the airport to make it back. I'm glad I did. I caught the last flight out of Florida, last flight out of Atlanta. But continue that. That's fantastic, especially with your community events as well on Saturdays. The first day of practice. So Joey Nania, maybe don't put it past him. I know he's got this every year deal, 2022, 2021, then he skips a year, and then he got 23. I know that this isn't the year that you're supposed to win one, and it's next year, but we wouldn't be shocked if you did it. So good luck, and I appreciate your preview and Eufaula for us.
All right, y'all have a great one. See ya.
Kyle, that's Joey Nania, our guy from the Opens. He would call Logan Martin his home lake, which is our last stop. And kind of like we talked about on live with Cliff Prince, when you've almost lost all hope, when you least expect it, that's when your biggest breakthrough has the chance to happen. And so there's somebody in the Opens right now that's had a tough year, and they maybe have already fished their home lake. They'd already fished somewhere that they felt comfortable, and they didn't do well, and they're probably a little discouraged. And this could be the week, with the fishing be as unstable as it is, that someone could find themselves 5 bites away from the classic on Saturday.
Yeah, and when you get tournaments like that as well, I mean, when things are constantly changing, water levels, wind, all the things that Joey mentioned, it can easily be something you figure out in the tournament. So it might not be a guy that thinks, a guy or gal that thinks he's on him now. But by the time the tournament starts and you figure out something, I mean, like a pattern, like you said, by the final day can just get incredibly good. So that, to me, makes it a super interesting tournament. Anytime that things are changing, adverse conditions, things of that nature, it's always going to be interesting because guys have to make a, decision based on the way things are going versus the way things are right this second. So always interesting when we get tournaments like this, and I think this one will be no different. I think it's gonna be a good one. I'm already looking forward to live on Saturday.
Yes, if you're watching it right now, it is day 1 of the Open. Takeoff's already underway, and the fishing action's happening. You can check out Bass Track. Like we said, Saturday we will be live on Bassmaster.com and Fox Sports 1. Super cool. Man, how about that? Last thing before we go, how about the Barstool Sports article that came out talking about soccer fans in Europe being frustrated that, or soccer fans in general were frustrated that the Euro soccer stuff wasn't on Fox and Bassmaster was. And then every comment I saw on Facebook was just like, roll tide America, woo pig, that's bass fishing, you know, like that is the USA. But Tommy said it as well. Every time we're worried about the drama or if it's going to be boring, we got to show 2 highlight packages of Ray's awesome morning, Cliff's awesome morning, and his awesome tournament. And then everyone else in the top 10 had their biggest flurry of the day when we were on Big Fox, when we were on National Fox. And it was great. I didn't stutter at the monitor in my hit. I felt like, so everything was perfect. Everything went great. And boy, we had a dramatic finish. But that was hilarious to see the post-mortem of people being like, what in the heck? And it's like, that's us. What's up?
Barstool's gonna, take notes on that, how much reaction and impressions they got on such a simple story. It's probably like a 200-word story. But the bass
Well, they've
fishing
been,
community.
that's
Go
only
ahead.
that's how many words that the bass fishing community can handle, like, at one time. Just to, no, I'm just kidding. But Barstool got to see the classic. Sydney came, was a part of the pro-am that you were there in person with. And so they should start to be more, they are being familiarized with the brand for sure.
No question. And like I said, the amount of people that rallied together and, like you said, commented on that post on Facebook, and I saw all the views and shares and everything it got, and I was like, man, like Barstool, just about anything gets pretty good numbers, but that post really did kind of blow up, to be honest. So yeah, that maybe they'll take more notes on that and be something that pay more attention to down the road.
And that's what somebody was dogging on and was like, yeah, based on the Twitter comments, Bassmaster is a bad decision. Brother, that is the wrong platform for the fishing industry. Like, somebody even said that, who should know, was like, yeah, reading the tweets. Yeah. I mean, I could see why they'd be upset. Brother, if you saw the amount of Facebook comments and even Instagram stuff about it, that is where the fishing community is. Twitter is not quite littered with fishing people as frequently as soccer people. So
And if
I
you don't believe
take
us,
plat.
if you don't
Yeah.
believe us, just go to Facebook and type in forward facing sonar to the top search bar, and let's just see where the fishing community's at, because you'll find them there.
Yeah. We'll see where their thoughts and opinions and beliefs and declarations are. So that was a very funny thing that came out of it, but very cool. All right, Kyle. Enjoy your week off, quote unquote. I know you'll be making all the
Yeah.
content appear on the website and do it in this deal, but I know it's different than being in 80-degree heat, 90-degree heat in Oklahoma before you go to Smith. So appreciate you, man. We'll see you in the next one. Congrats to Cliff Prince. Hopefully in this July month and a half break that we're going to have after Smith, we can maybe get Mr. Prince on and maybe Mr. Walters, some of those guys, and get a what's it been like over a month later type of vibe. So we will see.